Okay, listen.
It would
This is
all
now
go
the
wrong
time
so
here.
quickly.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Executive Director of the Vegas Chamber's Leadership Foundation, Kara Clark.
You're going to have to put that down while we do the pledge and everything else, okay?
I brought my notes.
Good morning, everybody. Is this working?
Morning. Morning.
Hi. It's so great to see all of these friendly faces and great friends in the audience. Thank you so much for joining us today for what I think will be a very important conversation about an issue that, you know, it's kind of a sleeper issue, except it's front and center every single day for thousands of working families in our state. And I'm so pleased that we can come together as leaders and have a meaningful conversation of not just the status quo, but how you all and we all as leaders can really positively address it and find some solutions to move the needle in a positive direction. I want to extend, this program today is part of our Leadership Foundation, the Vegas Chamber's Leadership Foundation. It's a 501c3 nonprofit that's dedicated to developing, educating, and convening leaders who are committed to improving things in our city. The Leadership Foundation is one of the ways the Vegas Chamber supports community development and engagement, and we appreciate you all joining in. I want to extend a special thank you to the U.S. Chamber Foundation for their collaboration and their very generous support of this forum. Without them, today's event would not be possible. So let's give them a proud round. The U.S. Chamber has been a very strong national leader on this issue. They have seen it as not just important to families, but this is a business issue. This is impacting employers in our economy, and thanks to the U.S. Chamber, they have elevated this issue in our country as a public policy topic and one that needs to be addressed in Congress. Before we begin, please silence your cell phones and your electronic devices as a courtesy. And now please rise and join me as we salute our flag with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated. We are honored to have several dignitaries with us today who I want to introduce. The Executive Director of the Governor's Office of Economic Development and former Chamber Chairman, Tom Burns. Thanks, Tom. State Senator Roberta Lang, thank you so much. State Senator and Chair of the Senate Committee on Finance, Marilyn Dondero. Assemblywoman Tracy Brown May, thanks Tracy. And Clark County Commissioner Marilyn Kirkpatrick. Before we begin, I do want to draw attention to a chamber event that's coming up very quickly. So many of these people in this room are interested in public policy and who our leaders are going to be. And we are going to have, the chamber's going to have a debate, the City of Las Vegas 2024 mayoral debate on July 31st. This is your opportunity to hear from the two general election candidates, former Congresswoman Shelley Berkeley and Councilwoman Victoria Seaman, on issues that impact our economy, small business issues, economic development issues. So please join us. We'll be at the Golden Nugget, and you can register at vegaschamber.com. Now it's time to kick off our conversation. Access to quality and affordable childcare is an issue that is important to our entire community, not just working families and working parents, but it's important to employers who need to access great employees. It's important to our overall economy that wants everybody to be able to work at their highest level and generate as much economic growth as possible. But childcare is something that's hindering those things, and I'm really pleased that we've all come together. The statistics, and you're going to hear from our two presenters who will delve in this even more, but the statistics are pretty alarming. The demand for childcare in Nevada is very high, with over 65% of children coming from households with two working parents. 74% of children ages 0 to 5 do not have access to licensed childcare. And this really blows me away. The cost of childcare in Nevada, in many cases, is more expensive than college tuition, oftentimes exceeding $17,000. How working families can even come close to addressing this financially is unbelievable. What a challenge. Ideally, childcare should not exceed 10% of a family's budget, but that is simply not the case. We're looking at statistics closer to 40 to 76%. This is causing parents to make choices that aren't really the choices they want to make, but the choices they feel they need to make. And that's what today is about. So to open this conversation and bring some national perspective, it's my pleasure to introduce Aaron Merchant. Aaron is the Senior Director of Program and Policies at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation, and he's going to share the U.S. Chamber of Commerce's work and findings with us. Aaron works in the early childhood education portfolio. He is leading the efforts to educate policy makers, state and local chambers, and early childhood advocates on businesses' role in early education to promote investments and in the workforce of today and tomorrow. And let me stress, this is a conversation that business needs to be front and center, and the Vegas Chamber is committed to being part of that conversation. Before joining the U.S. Chamber Foundation, Merchant worked at the National Association for the Education of Young Children as the Assistant Director of Public Policy. There, he led the association's engagement with Congress and efforts to elevate the voices and needs of the early childhood workforce. So please welcome Aaron Merchant.
Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Thank you so much. I'm just going to start the timer on my watch because I could talk about this all day, and I have. So again, my name is Aaron. I've worked at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation almost 4 years now on childcare and policy and the intersection of childcare as a workforce infrastructure. I also have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, and so it's just childcare start to finish for me. And I'm excited to be here. So I want to talk to everybody today about the sort of 3 phases that I've seen the Chamber and broadly the business community go through as it pertains to childcare as a workforce issue. And so the first era, we'll say that starts around 2016, 2017. We created a report called Workforce of Today, Workforce of Tomorrow, which the sort of subheading could have been, y'all think about childcare? We sort of thought that we would have to go to different chambers and sort of pitch it and be like, here's why we think maybe you should be focusing more on childcare, here's why it's really important for the local economy. But the response that we got was, finally, thank you. There was chambers from all over the country who were like, this has been an issue, we don't know what to do about it, we need some guidance. And so that moved into the chamber looking at what have other states done, what can be replicated, what can be amplified. And so Workforce of Today, Workforce of Tomorrow, we're talking about making sure that parents have the ability to enter and succeed in the workforce, and we're making sure that children have access to quality, flexible education that meets their needs and set the foundation for all future learning. And so being the chamber, we felt that an obvious spot where we could provide additional value would be to look at what is the economic cost of a lack of childcare or due to childcare breakdowns. And so in 2019, we did a series of surveys. We looked at 4 different states, and we called it the Untapped Potential Report. And this data was gathered in 2019, or as we call it now, the pre-pandemic surveys. And we found that states were losing anywhere from hundreds of millions to billions of dollars a year alone in missed tax revenue, payroll taxes, spending ability, because there were parents who were, especially women, dropping out of the workforce to provide care. But even folks who weren't dropping out of the workforce were sort of in this tenuous sort of like duct tape situation where one friend was, watching the kids on Monday, and then maybe they had like part-time childcare on other days. And so we released that report February 2020. It actually turned out to be the last publicly attended event that I went to for about 2.5 years. A few months later, the world shut down, and that was when the second era of childcare for the Chamber and Chamber Foundation began. The beginning of that was, holy smokes, we need to save childcare. And that was when, being in DC, a lot of times there's a little bit of everybody's on the same team. There's like different factions and there's sort of like different agendas. From mid-2020 to mid-2021, it was just how do we make sure that childcare does not completely implode? And it was in part because now, all the folks who could afford, and I say this as a childcare expert, this is the technical term, the bougie childcare, those kids were in their house now, right? And so they got a real feel for, oh, this is what it's like for most people every day. Trying to figure out how are we going to do this? How are we going to balance everything? And it was on Zoom calls. It was, everybody was like, what are we going to do about childcare? So legislation was passed, emergency funds were sent, and then when the pandemic was like kind of over or mostly over, that was when it sort of got into, okay, but what do we really do now, right? And so the chamber, and I'm not sure how to bring up this slide. There we go. And so during this time, when we quickly shifted from, are y'all thinking about childcare, to, guys, we really need to do something about childcare. The chamber produced several different resources, and this one has become a foundational document. And this is guidance for individual employers or groups of employers who really didn't know where to start. They were like, what we're hearing from our employees is we got to do something about childcare. We're not childcare experts. We're not sure what to do. And so this is part of a larger document that actually walks through all of these different interventions. But this roadmap kind of goes through, quick wins or low-hanging fruit, internal investments that employers can make in their employees, and then community investments. And we'll talk about community investments as sort of the third era of the business case for childcare. And so with quick wins, something that is most often overlooked but is the most important thing as far as I have seen is giving your employees or giving your working parents a forum where they feel comfortable telling you what their childcare challenges are. Because nobody wants to be the person who's like, hey guys, the commute's rough, right? You don't want to seem like someone who's bringing problems, not solutions. So by giving folks the opportunity to be like, what does your everyday look like? What are your childcare challenges? Because a lot of employers immediately think, well, I can't put an on-care childcare site at my building, either because we don't have room, either because we only have 12 employees. But sometimes employees are like, can we have a flexible start time to work? Sometimes employees are like, I have pretty solid childcare, but every now and then it falls through. Is there like a backup plan we could have? Or I just need help finding childcare. Is there a concierge service? And so the roadmap really sort of brought to the forefront, like there are things that you can do. It's not necessarily easy, it's not necessarily inexpensive, but it is worthwhile. Now we have data to back that up, where you see increased recruitment, increased retention, increased employee satisfaction. And so strictly from a business sense, and I want to make clear that I'm not at all disregarding the importance for the children for learning. This isn't like as long as, put the kids in a field with a soccer ball, as long as the parents are at work, it's fine. But as a competitive edge and an investment in your employees, we now have data that shows that investing in childcare is good for the company and good for working parents and good for the kids. Now, what we have also seen is that, as my colleague Caitlin likes to say, it's almost like the Newtonian rule of physics, but for childcare. Like for every action, there's going to be another reaction, right? So if you increase, let's say you give a stipend, so now more people can afford childcare, but is that going to decrease access? Let's say that you have all of these spots, but you don't have enough teachers, right? And so you have to sort of approach childcare from all of these different angles at the same time. And so that is where sort of our third era of childcare comes in. So we went from like, are we talking about it, to what can we do about it? How do we learn about it? How do we sort of get over this learning curve? To, okay, we have now recognized that it's a holistic endeavor, right? It is something that, let's say to go topical, let's say I'm a chips manufacturer, right? So I want to make sure that all of my employees have childcare. But a lot of these chips manufacturing plants are in small towns, in North Carolina, in Idaho, and you know who else needs childcare? Are the teachers who are teaching the kids who aren't 0 to 5, are the nurses that you take your kids to when they're sick, are the librarians. Everybody needs childcare who has childcare. And as someone who 5 years ago was the guy who did not have kids and was like, oh, okay, I gotta go pick up the kids, sure, to now being a guy with 2 kids who's constantly like, hang on, I gotta go, like it's a kids thing. Even if you don't have kids, if your coworkers don't have reliable, affordable childcare, that's gonna impact the whole team. So when I say holistic, what I want to be very clear is that I'm not saying that the business community needs to solve this problem entirely. I have not spoken to one employer that's like, you know what I'd like to do is get out of the beverage bottling business and completely take over childcare. What I hear is, I really want my employees to have what they need, both because I care about them and also because it is costing me a lot of money to have people drop out of the workforce, to have to retrain people. And also, there might be a bottling company down the road that has excellent childcare benefits, and we're losing the most qualified workers to that. So it's not any one reason. But so I want to be very clear that it's not, the business community is not trying to take over childcare. The business community isn't responsible for providing everyone childcare. But the seat at the table that chambers and employers have is paramount. And it's for several reasons. First, it's because up until about 2020, it was sort of an overlooked perspective. There was a sense that it was sort of one of two schools of thought. It was either, well, you had kids, figure it out, or it was like, well, you're a corporation, why aren't you just providing this? It's kind of these two camps. And now it's like, okay, how do we work together? How do we figure this out? The second thing is that it is just objectively true that when the business community rallies around an issue, it gets people's attention. And so when we talk about the third era, community investments, it's not that I'm saying like, okay, all of you need to be telling policymakers, raise my taxes. It's totally cool. But what we do need to do is use the business community's public standing to elevate the issue of childcare. So I hear we have a mayoral debate, right? If you have, and I came from, as Kara mentioned, I came from an organization that just did childcare. And so when I would go to Capitol Hill, when I would go talk to people, I'd be like, we need to do more about childcare. And they'd be like, of course, that's what you're saying. Your title is, childcare specialist for the childcare company. But you're the chamber, you're a large employer, you go to the mayoral debate, the gubernatorial debate. Apparently there's a presidential election this year, haven't heard anything about it. But when the business community says, we need to do something about childcare, you don't even have to bring a solution. Just bang the drum and say, we need to do something about childcare. What are we doing about childcare? And eventually, as we've seen in a lot of other states, eventually someone has to answer that question. And so it can be through taxes, and you've got a packet there that sort of walks through the most relevant taxes that most relevant employer taxes as it relates to childcare. We've seen in Iowa different grant programs where the grant actually goes to a business, and then that business creates a committee to decide on how to spend that money to increase access. In some states, in Kentucky, and we're seeing this in other states, they've actually taken public funds to pay for the childcare of qualified childcare providers, because there were so many providers on the sidelines because they couldn't afford childcare for their kids. In Michigan, we've seen the Tri-Share program, where they're splitting it a third of the cost to the employer, a third of the cost to the state, a third of the cost to the parents. And so what came out of the pandemic was a great phase of incubation. And as Kara mentioned, sometimes childcare is a quiet whisper, but it's always at the forefront of our minds. And so my hope, and a little bit, I guess, my call to action for y'all is to take it from a whisper to a megaphone, because we all know, and especially if you're parents of young children, we all know that it's not going away. And just making sure that everyone knows that is how we get to the fourth era of childcare for the business community, and that's solutions. So thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it, and happy to chat afterward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Erin. I really appreciate those insights. Now, our next speaker is homegrown Nevadan. She is a graduate of UNLV. She has been part of our community for some time. Her name is Katie Gilbertson, and she's a Nevada native with a robust background in public policy and economic analysis. She has worked for the Governor's Office of Economic Development, the esteemed think tanks of Brookings Mountain West and the Lindsay Institute, and Nevada's leading economic consulting firm of Applied Analysis. Katie now serves as a policy analyst for the Nevada Governor's Office of Workforce Innovation, where she is the liaison for the Governor's Workforce Development Board and manager for various OWIN programs. And I want to give a shout out to the Governor's Workforce Development Board, especially the leadership of Ken Evans and our Government Affairs Chairman Hugh Anderson. They have taken this on as a real issue. They commissioned a report, and you have copies of it on your table. But this is something that they recognize as important to not just the business community, but for workforce development. And they've made a big splash with this. So thank you, Ken, for your leadership. So please welcome to the stage Katie Gilbertson.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Katie Gilbertson. I'm the policy analyst for the Nevada Governor's Office of Workforce Innovation, liaison to the Governor's Workforce Development Board, and thank you again to all my Governor's Workforce Development Board members that are here today. Really appreciate your support. And before I get started on my remarks and why I'm here today, the last in-person chamber event I was at was in June of 2022. Brookings Mountain West was just releasing their latest economic and public policy report. Dave Demore is on stage. He's featuring some remarks that and some research that I had done on the live entertainment tax. There's a postcard he's handing out. He's going to feature me and acknowledge me. I had a spoonful of food go into my mouth, and it ended up on my outfit. Because I was just like, oh my God, like that's me. So yeah, so that was the last time I was here. So you guys caught me at a better time today. Haven't had anything to eat yet. So again, really, thank you guys so much for having me here today to talk a little bit about what our office does and what the Governor's Workforce Development Board does. So as Erin has just mentioned and Kara mentioned in her opening remarks, we don't need to really explain why childcare is an issue to the workforce and the labor force. It's very apparent. One recent statistic that I think keeps bringing up why we are still at the table and still talking about this issue was released in March of 2024 this year. This was from a Lending Tree report that deemed Nevada as the most costly state for childcare they did it on their analysis on a weekly income basis. So this statistic here shows that 32% of parents working families' income is going towards childcare every week. On an annual income basis, that equates to $25,000, which, as Kara mentioned earlier, that's probably more than childcare, especially at UNLV here. So what do we do about this, right? And obviously, it's not going to get solved today. Our office isn't going to tackle it on its own. Our board's not going to tackle it on its own. But I'm hoping that, through our remarks, through Erin's remarks, through this panel today, we can hopefully go towards moving the needle a little bit further for our state. So first, I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about the Office of Workforce Innovation. For those of you that don't know, we're going to talk about the Governor's Workforce Development Board and how that drives business-driven policy. Thank you. Yeah, wasn't as tall. And then finally, I'm going to go into the Governor's Workforce Development Board's child care initiative and how we link child care and workforce development policy. So we'll start off here. So this is the Office of Workforce Innovation. We were created by former Governor Brian Sandoval in 2017. And really our purpose is to serve as a public workforce system navigator. And that includes being a navigator for individuals, for businesses, and the overall community at large. And I'll talk a little bit about how we accomplish that. Another, I think, great asset that our office does is that we bring all these people together. Serving as a navigator means being a convener. And so we have all these, probably can't read it, but there's all our partners on there, including K through 12, education, higher education, chambers of commerce, private industry, skilled trades. We partner with our other state entities like Veteran Services, Department of Corrections, Office of New Americans. We really take a innovative approach, economic development as well. And we take a really innovative approach towards really solving a workforce development perspective and everything at the statewide level. So some of the ways that our office accomplishes our purpose of serving as a navigator: we do partnerships through the Governor's Workforce Development Board, which I'll touch on in a second. We have data, so we have the state's longitudinal data system for longitudinal data, so that's called NPower, and we have some of our NPower research grantees here as well today. And finally, we do partnerships. So we do that through our 4 competitive federal grants, and then we also have 3 competitive federal grants through the state's T-Mobile Settlement Fund. So as I mentioned, a main avenue for us executing our business partnerships is through the Governor's Workforce Development Board. So what is that? The Governor's Workforce Development Board is a 31-member board, all appointed by the governor, and we have representatives from a majority of industry as well as skilled labor and government. Our charge is to craft policy recommendations that support workforce development initiatives in accordance with the governor's vision, and then we deploy those recommendations to the legislature, to other state agencies, to our local workforce development boards, and policymakers across the state just in general. And so a good tangible example of how we have recently done this is through the Governor's Workforce Development Board strategic plan that we just got approved at our last full board meeting in June. It was supported by the governor's office with a representative from there giving a letter of support for the report. And through that strategic plan, we are prioritizing 3 buckets for the Governor's Workforce Development Board. First is population, so those are underserved people we're defining as that have high unemployment rates or low labor force participation, which bleeds into the child care initiative quite well. The second is engagement, so partnering with the private sector to show them the benefits of the public workforce system and how it can help with their workforce needs, which also bleeds into the child care initiative. And then third is alignment, so making sure that all these players are in the room together, they're convening, and they're talking through these solutions at events like this, in meetings, in any way they can get something accomplished. That's what the Governor's Workforce Development Board does. A good example of how we're going to accomplish these things is through our Governor's Workforce Development Board strategic plan scorecard. So we just developed this and presented this to our executive committee last week. And so what you can see here really is there's a lot on that board. There's a lot we're trying to get done, but just keeping in mind the underserved individuals, the businesses that need workforce solutions, and alignment of the system in general. That's what's guiding our action items that you can see on the left-hand side of our scorecard. And to make sure that we are staying accountable and transparent, we're going to have timeframes, we're going to have execution teams, tangible measurements for each action item, and lastly, a status indicator that's all going to be published on our website to make sure we're keeping government transparent and holding ourselves accountable as well as all of our partners to make sure things actually get done, which is a hard thing to do. So that's the Governor's Workforce Development Board strategic plan. And a lot of this, as I mentioned, this was just done June of this year. A lot of this work, especially with underserved individuals and helping businesses, was informed by our work with the Child Care Initiative. So the Governor's Workforce Development Board Child Care Initiative, we started this after the COVID-19 pandemic. There's a huge labor shortage. The business members on our board were like, how do we get people back to work? Every business we have, every business we hear from is facing this labor shortage. And we figured, lack of childcare is probably maybe not the answer, but a answer. So we invited our colleagues with the Children's Cabinet and Division of Welfare and Supportive Services at the state to come talk to our board in August 22 and October of 22. And they shared some of the statistics that Kara mentioned earlier, that 74% of children across the state ages 0 to 5 do not have access to licensed childcare, and every Nevada county is a childcare desert, meaning that there's more demand for seats than there are providers. So the Governor's Workforce Development Board decided to create a childcare working group to get a report out into the Nevada legislature ahead of their 82nd session, which was in February 2023. So we make the working group in December, and we got to get a report done in February. That's the report you guys have in front of you. It was 132 pages. So, like on a per month page, that's a lot of pages. But it's okay, we got it done. So it was a really good way for our business members to put at the forefront of policymakers what they have been experiencing and why this issue matters. As Aaron mentioned, that's how the main way you can get things out there and affect change, is by putting something down on paper and conveying it effectively to your representatives. So another facet of this report that we did was a survey to our business community. We received over 500 responses in this 1 month. So we did it from December 2022 to January 2023, so during the holidays too. And we got over 500 responses from our business community. Dave DeMore and Brookings Mountain West provided that analysis, and I thank him for that. And so a key finding I thought was pretty interesting from that survey was that of those surveyed, 94% of businesses found that having access to childcare would improve their workforce retention. So it seems like this is, again, not the solution to a labor shortage, but a solution. So with that report, we had our key findings. We made a little cute one-pager that conveyed these findings a little bit better. And then we did a lot of outreach with the report. So we started sharing this across multiple national and local news outlets. We had a 45F webinar with the Vegas and Reno Chambers that was last May. We had a Department of Labor Women's Bureau event that was held virtually as well with Chair Hugh Anderson and Vice Chair Ken Evans. And we've just been really trying to get the word out. Our office's charge is not to really serve as a child care subsidy administrator, nor is that the Governor's Workforce Development Board's role. But our role of convening and raising awareness to this issue was really, I think, accomplished through our tremendous outreach efforts and our partners in the community and making, we don't have all the solutions, but we're telling you this is an issue, sort of thing. So I think that was really our lasting impact, was raising awareness of this issue in conjunction with our partners. And now we have formed a standing subcommittee from the Governor's Workforce Development Board just to show that we have lasting, we have a lasting interest in this issue. And we're continuously working with our partners in our subcommittee and our leadership to find solutions to all these challenges. We're hoping to craft some policy recommendations at our upcoming subcommittee meetings that we can deploy to our legislatures ahead of the 2025 session. So we're right back where we started, but that's okay. You have to keep going on these things. Change is never fast or easy. So I guess my concluding remarks are that the 32% of income going towards childcare is pretty alarming. You don't want to be the highest state in that regard. The next highest state is Montana, and theirs is 22%. So that's a pretty big jump from first to second. And Iowa is the last state, and they have 10% of their income going towards childcare. So obviously there's much room to improve for Nevada. I would say that that's a good benchmark since it's a recent stat that we can try and work towards lowering for our Nevada families and our businesses to get employers back to work. So thank you.
Okay, now it's time for our panel conversation. But before we do this, I want to just point out, one of the things we discovered when we did the 45F tax credit webinar is that not only do most businesses not even know that exists, and yes, the Chamber of Commerce, we need to talk about that more, but the accountants, their tax advisors don't understand it, and so they're not talking about it to their clients. So one of the things all of you can do, and there's a sheet on your paper, or there's some sheets, is to talk about the things that these are tax credits available to businesses of all sizes that can help them with resources to address this issue with their employees. Be an evangelizer about that, because the more businesses know that there's an opportunity for it, the more likely they are to at least look into it and see if that works for as part of their solution. So to get our conversation started, I would like to invite my colleague and introduce my colleague, Paul Moradkin. He's the Senior Vice President of Government Affairs at the Vegas Chamber, who's going to moderate the conversation. And you guys all know Paul, and you know how awesome he is, so let's give him a round of applause. And I want to introduce our panelists and welcome them to the stage. The Executive Director of the Governor's Office of Economic Development, Tom Burns. State Senator and Chair of the Senate Committee on Finance, Marilyn Dondero. Clark County Commissioner, Marilyn Kirkpatrick. And Early Education Program Manager at United Way of Southern Nevada, Shanell Townsend. Shanell. Thanks, Shanell. And please welcome Paul.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you for our esteemed panel for joining us today. Very much appreciate the time you've made to join us for this discussion. But I want to give a special shout out to a special young lady with us in the room today, Marilyn Kirkpatrick. Everybody, I think, knows Maddie. Maddie has been involved in many policy discussions on childcare, actually, with Commissioner Kirkpatrick and many of us in the room during COVID about childcare needs, and actually helped launch a couple efforts that the Commissioner talked about today. But for other lobbyists in the room, Maddie's already committed in turning with the Chamber in 2035 in Carson City, so back off. We've called dibs. So anyways, let's get started, and appreciate the panel for joining us today. And we're going to start off with the opening question. I'd like to ask each of you how your organization or government entity is involved with childcare and how it relates to workforce development and the economic impact it has on our community, including employers, employees, and their hardworking families. So, Shanell, let's start with you, please.
All right, and thank you. Can you guys hear me? Thank you for having me today. My name is Shanell, and I'm the program manager at United Way of Southern Nevada. I work with the Nevada Ready Pre-K program, and we are committed to working with the Nevada Department of Education to ensure that every child has equitable, accessible, and quality, developmentally appropriate child care. At United Way, we have so many initiatives that we work through. We work for workforce, and we really make sure that children and adults all have what they need in order to succeed. So one of our main initiatives is the Nevada Ready Pre-K program, the partnership also that we have with Nevada Department of Education. And what we do is we provide financial assistance to families in order for them to be able to work, go to school, maybe get some training done. And you know, what we're finding is that, you know, families are so grateful to be able to get out back to the workforce, because we know the pandemic really forced a lot of us and a lot of our families and community to even still not able to make the money they were making prior to the pandemic. And so we really just kind of focus on that financial aspect of allowing families to bring their child to a center that's not, that when you think about a family who needs financial assistance and they think about where I have to place my child, the last thing we want to worry about is, where is my child going to be placed? Is the area safe? Is a teacher going to be, you know, kind to my child? Are they going to learn? That's so much to worry about, in addition to having to go to work for 8 hours, 10 hours a day. So what we do is we provide education, we provide training, curriculum, everything a center needs, becoming from a 1-star to like a 5-star center, in order to be able just to satisfy everything that a family might need in order to feel safe and comfortable that when their child's at a child care center.
Awesome, thank you. Commissioner Kirkpatrick.
So the county really doesn't have a role in childcare, but we do personally, because we have to ensure that we have a saying that thrive by 5, and so every child that has a great foundation can thrive if by 5 we've given them all the tools that they need. And some of that is just putting them in a place where it's safe for them, and that's where childcare does come in for a lot of our kids. So, but we have done some things because I personally believe in preschool. I believe in childcare. I believe it's good social skills for kids. I believe that it's good routine making. But and during COVID, you know, first of all, I want to give a shout out to all the childcares that opened, because that was a huge thing. Because we had nurses and doctors and everybody who had to be somewhere, and we had a handful of childcares that stepped up. So shout out to them. But so the county has taken through social service. One, we helped Rainbow Dreams so that we could change them to a pre-K school and kindergarten. They now have over 300 students that are going every single day, which is awesome. Huge. So we invested $5 million over 3 years to get them up and going. We invested $1.2 million, $1.3 million in North Las Vegas for a pre-K building that's going to open this year at the YMCA. We we invested after COVID because we felt that childcare companies, businesses could benefit from being members of the chamber, whether it came to health insurance for their employees, whether it came to networking. So we have done that because infrastructure is truly one of the barriers to the cost of doing it. So we are currently working on some grants through some opiate dollars, because you'd be surprised to know that how many children are impacted from substance abuse. And it's a good use of our dollars to invest opiate dollars in order to ensure the infrastructure is there. So that is our role, because we want kids to have a safe place and a good foundation. But we work well with the state, and we've done some good things. We advocated for the MCOs the MCOs are the managed care folks that take Medicaid, so they are now providing child care opportunities for a lot of the kids, and that was a collaboration with the county and the state. So we continue to put our fingers in wherever we can, because we know a good foundation for any child is a road to success.
Senator Dondero Loop.
Good morning. So I feel like I've been working on this my entire life because I have a minor in early childhood. So even back in my college days, I sort of recognized the importance of the early childhood education. Unfortunately, I have a lot of constituents who come to me and say, I can't afford childcare. I've got to quit work, or I can't afford to quit work, but I can't afford to It's this catch-22 they're always in. And so what I want to do in this next session is I would love to, I've already put in a bill draft for the Office of Early Childhood, which would be nestled under the Department of Education. And the reason for that is because we already have a P20 continuum. We don't need to separate off and have something else to work with and try to put all the pieces together. Let's consolidate. So when we transition and we do things, we're all under the same roof and we're working with these kids. Commissioner is absolutely right. Kids deserve not only a quality place to be, but a safe place to be. All of us in this room recognize that we want our kids to be in a safe place. Unfortunately, some kids aren't in that position. When I taught kindergarten, I can't tell you how many kids over the years, and that was just one of the little stints I did I taught kindergarten for 10 years, and at that time it was twice a day. So I taught 60 kids a day because we didn't have classroom size reduction for 10 years. So over all those children, I can't tell you how many kids I had that came and didn't have shoes that fit, had shoes with holes, didn't have a jacket on a cold day, whatever happened. And that happens in a daycare setting as well. It's not just a regular school setting. And we all are told over and over again, start reading to your kids when they're babies, do this when they're babies. And yet we forget that a quality daycare comes with quality preschool attributes, learning your letters, learning your sounds, learning your colors, learning what a cow looks like, learning whatever it is that we're teaching them. So all those things are really healthy for little people. And it provides them also with a sense of security because now they know something and they feel proud of themselves. So early child care is so important, and I have a lot more to expound on, but I'll wait till the later question.
Thanks, Senator. I appreciate it. And of course, Director Burns.
I have a feeling I'm going to end up ceding a lot of time to the senator.
It's always a good political move.
By the way, Mr. Burns' wife and I taught school together in elementary school, so yes, I've spent lots of time with Mrs.
That's right. That's right. Probably more qualified to speak on this than I am. So at GOED, like some of our other folks, we don't have a dedicated staff or mission that stands behind childcare, but it is part of an overall environment of a good economy, right? And so what we often do is convene what challenges or concerns people have as they move to any city in our state. And I think what you're going to find is I travel to a conference twice a year. There's about 35 of me, state economic directors, and sounds like an exciting place to be, doesn't it? 33 of me. But a pretty consistent conversation about what's going on in all of those other states, what are their needs, stems about workforce housing and childcare. It is a societal challenge, right? And I think it really evolves. We have become a much more mobile society, even in my lifetime. And we had become more mobile prior to that, but really in my lifetime, It's not unusual for people to move to city to city to city, and that creates great opportunity, opportunity for learning environments and seeing different things and expanding your roles and expanding your life. That's an outstanding thing. It doesn't mean that sometimes there isn't a casualty to that. And one of the casualties to that is you lose that core root system you had from being the fourth generation in your city, right? That you have grandma and grandpa and aunts and uncles and people that are just there to pitch in on those kinds of things, and that part of our life has changed. And I'm not suggesting we should go back to the other way, by the way. It's just what we have to learn to deal with. And so this is kind of a new paradigm in our world that we're going to have to grapple with if we want successful, well-adjusted children and want a community that thrives.
No, thank you. And I'd like to thank each of you for helping us create a foundation as we dive deeper into today's conversations. Director Burns, as head of GOED, of course, part of your efforts are to diversify the economy. Yep. And part of that's, of course, relocating business to our great state, and as part of those conversations. How much does childcare come up in those conversations with prospective employers, and how do you address those concerns or talk about some of the benefits of coming to Nevada in the childcare area?
Yeah. I will say that, I'm kind of a newbie in this space. I've been here about 18 months. And that topic has not been addressed directly, but the quality of the community that people are moving into is addressed, and we talk about that quite a bit. I will tell you that GOED lost a really good candidate about 6 months ago for this very topic, right? Somebody that had to make the hard decision that it wasn't an opportunity to come to work at GOED because of their child care situation. So as we move forward, one of the things that we have to address, I think one of the things that Aaron brought up is just having the conversation about it, right? Don't be confused. This conversation is going on somewhere. So you can choose to be part of the narrative, or somebody will craft the narrative for you, right? And if you want to be part of the solution that you can live with, for lack of a better term, and we all, I hope, want to raise great, talented, well-adjusted kids. If you want to be part of that solution, you're going to need to be, or you can have it imposed upon you, or you can be part of the solution. That's kind of what your challenge is.
And Director Burns, you brought up a good point about, you were recently at a conference with 35 of your peers. Yeah. In those conversations with them, are you seeing more of that child care dialogue on a national level too, in terms of recruitment, expansion for businesses?
Always. One of the things that was talked about earlier, and I think Aaron brought it up again, was really the loss of talent that you have sometimes when somebody has to make that choice to stay home, right? So is that job going to get filled? Well, probably at some level. Sure. Are you going to get the best person for the job? Often, maybe not, because maybe that person had to make a lifestyle choice about raising their children, which is a noble choice, by the way. But you're going to lose some really talented people in the process of doing that.
And I think that's a great shift to the senator. Senator, of course, as a former educator and now as a state legislator, you see all perspectives as a policymaker in your role in education. What role do you think the legislative body has in child care development policies, with looking at next session potentially? You just mentioned you're going to run a BDR. What do you think we can get ahead of as we prepare for the next session on that to support those efforts or conversations to facilitate?
Well, I think that these conversations, just like this, are really important because I think we need to bring together the business community, the child care community, which even though it's a business, it's still sort of in that other space of education. And I think that we need to get all of us having these conversations. The unfortunate part is that we also have people who are not choosing to have children. They may want children, but they're choosing to not have children because they see all of these things going on and they choose to not make that choice, which is their choice and is great and fine for them. But I would hate to see somebody making a choice, I can't afford daycare, so therefore I can't have a child. So that's another piece to this. And the other thing is that I forget if it was 19 or 21 which session, but we infiltrated $50 million to raise that tax threshold. So I think that unfortunately money's going to be a conversation that we need to have. United Way does yeoman's work as a nonprofit, but certainly that we need to bring that to the forefront.
And Senator, regarding the BDR you're going to be working on, which is great to hear, if folks want to reach out to you, they can do that directly about helping you gain support and community engagement on those conversations?
Yes, absolutely. I'm still in the stages. In fact, I just got a text message from LCB asking me to give them a call today.
So they know where you're at all times.
Yeah, hurry up, hurry up. It's almost August 1st. And so I was trying to get a few ducks in a row before I actually finished it up. You know, a lot of times you just put in this general BDR that says, you know, whatever, education or childcare, or I was trying to get a few ducks in a row. I may not get that all done, but for our little ducks, but we'll try. And Aaron, get ready. Let me tell you what happens when one of them leaves childcare and goes into school. Then you have to find a childcare that opens so that you can drop them off at childcare so you can get to school. And in my case, I had to be to school. I couldn't flex 5 minutes because I had kids in line waiting for me. So, yeah, it gets crazier, unfortunately.
No, absolutely. Commissioner, you have focused your great efforts on fostering greater collaboration and engagement with the child care providers. You touched on a little bit, of course, and the larger business community. Can you share why it's been a priority for you as a commissioner? As you indicate, it's not been a formalized function of the commission, but something you have focused on in the last several years. And why you think it's important to engage on that, and how does child care, in your perspective, impact your constituents? You have a very diverse district, and the employees in your district, and most importantly, how does it impact Maddie?
So, listen, sometimes I get in trouble for being direct, but being said, I'm here early.
Is anybody surprised by
and,
that? No?
Let's just have a real conversation. So, this is not a new issue, right? This has been an issue for a long time. I was a single mom, trying with 2 little girls, you know, trying to work the graveyard and get them. And fortunately, that is 60% of the people out there, right? There was a lady who was recently in trouble because she left her child in another state because she was trying to go to work, because she was trying to pay the bills, because we say, quit relying on assistance, go get a job and do what you're supposed to, but then we leave them hanging, right? So this is not a new issue. We've discussed this. We tried for many years to get MBT credits for childcare so that businesses could get some credits, and it fell on deaf ears for a long time. But here's the real crux of the issue is now we're at a crossroads, right? Kindergarten is abysmal when it comes to birth rates, right? We're seeing that, to the senator's point, that people are no longer having kids, and that creates a whole other problems as people grow. But now we're a big city, and we got to act like a big city for a change, right? We want good paying jobs. We want people to come here. We want people to be on our economy. But at the end of the day, Marilyn is with me today because I couldn't figure out how to get her to her location this morning, get me here at the same time. That's a struggle every single person in this valley has, whether it's mom, dad, grandma, and if we don't have a hard conversation, and if we don't bring real solutions to the legislature, we have no one to blame but ourselves, right? So you want to talk about legislation that we could do? Put some money out there for grants. As you're bringing new businesses, tell them, you got to step up. We did that with the state when it came to those MCOs, right? For years and years, people that were getting the Medicaid contracts, making their money and going back to another state. Lo and behold, during COVID, we figured out that we were dumb because we were leaving money on the table because every other state was requiring them to give back to the community. And so they are doing that now. And that is because we pushed. That is because the legislature said, you're making all this money, you ought to get back. And childcare, for healthy living, all of that stuff, those are important. So I just say to all of you, don't walk out of here today without an action item. I did the craziest thing, and I'll get to your question in a minute, but I'm passionate.
There's no 2 limited minutes, it's fine.
But I would just say that I invested in 4 teenagers, right? We have 4 teenagers that went to all their stuff, their leadership thing, and they said, oh my gosh, preschool. Kids gotta have preschool. My brothers and sisters don't get the same opportunity that I get. And I said, what will it take to change that, right? 16 and 17-year-old girls that wanted to do it. And so we created a website, which we're going to launch at the county commission, because I feel those girls are deserving of getting that. And it cost me $40,000 to invest in these girls, to create an app and a website you can actually find. Because the state one, I can't figure it out myself, and I can't help constituents. But this one, prektoday.org, is something they're going to go out in the community. 40,000. Imagine how much we've probably wasted 40,000 in our environments doing something, right? So why is it important to me? Because I represent a very diverse district. On the east side of town, we have a childcare desert. And we have a childcare desert because of the base, right? So the rules say that we can't have any children, any child care in the APZ zone because it's not safe for them, right? So in the event that a plane would do, so what happens to all of those kids over there? They don't have any options. So we've tried to do different things, and now we're trying to bring play into their apartment complexes, trying to bring childcare into those kind of places. In the far northwest, we don't have enough childcare opportunities, right? So I look for myself, where do I go? I either got to backtrack 5 miles, or I got to go closer to my work to make sure that Marilyn has a place to go. And then if I look at Mesquite, they don't have enough seats, right? So they bring a workforce there, there's not enough seats. So there are tons of things, and we worked with the legislature last session to break down some of those regulations, some of those barriers that were a problem. And the legislature did a great job on looking at what are those things. But if we don't help these children have a safe place and take a little bit of stress off the parents, we're never going to get the workforce that we need, and we're never going to live up to the big city that we are. So I just implore you all, whether it's the Southern Nevada Forum, whether it's an idea that you have, start putting the solutions out and build a group of people that can go to the legislature and say, you know what, Senator, I'm behind you. What do you need me to do? I'll talk to every single legislator for you, right? 63 of them, because not everybody has children. Not everybody understands childcare. Until you've walked a day in those shoes, you don't necessarily know what it takes. But I say to people, I am fortunate that, one, I have a good foundation at home. My husband's great. I have Marilyn, who's very accommodating, and she gets choices. You want to go, or what do you want to do today? But not everybody has that same thing, and everybody should, right? Everybody should. So I tell people in my district, hey, not for nothing, if you just had a baby, go to school while you're at home on that 4 to 6 months, because maybe there's some things that you could do where you can work from home. You can be a Medicaid coder from home. You can do some of these things, because 0 to 2, I'm a firm believer that in-home childcare is probably best for you, because you want the babies to be bonding with somebody, but from 3 to 5, they can learn. They're sponges. So for my constituents, it is top priority. To be honest, I'm the kind of girl that I've ended up babysitting. I babysat during COVID because we couldn't get the child cares open fast enough to the regulations. So I said, bring them to me. I'll sit in the county building and I'll watch them all. We'll have some fun. I might break some rules, but don't look. But I mean, other people got to do that. We got to invest in the infrastructure in order. In a good child care teacher could be that future teacher in our classrooms. It could be the director of the child care facility. We got to invest in that workforce too, so that once the daycares are there, and I don't like to call them daycare because it's child care, right? Children are getting cared for, whether it's night or day. So I'm very passionate about it too, so I can always find some pennies to build some infrastructure. But if you know empty buildings out there, call someone and say, hey, maybe you could do a lease for a year for $1 so that we could get into that neighborhood. Maybe you can do this, and I'll help on my side, whatever I got to do to make it happen. But I'm just saying to all you in this room, the time is now to either be a big city and childcare is a topic, or we can be here 20 years, well, Marilyn can be here 20 years from now discussing this stuff. So, did I answer your question? Not sure I did, but I'm
You did. And I think you just announced her campaign for state assembly. So, Shanell, we'll turn to you next. Can you share with us some of the work that's being done by the United Way of Southern Nevada in the child care arena? Obviously, you guys are a great data source and services you provide. And how do those initiatives support our community's workforce and their families as it relates to providing quality early childhood development?
Yes. And so I did want to just piggyback off of what you said. And you're right. And I will answer the question, but you are absolutely correct. This is my soapbox too. And so when you talk about workforce and childcare, we forget that a lot of the workforce is in the building. I was a child care teacher at one point. I became a director at one point, but I remember I have 3 children of my own. And so I remember going there making $10.50 an hour and, and that's I was married, $10.50 an hour, almost 3/4 of my paycheck, and I was working there and still had to pay for childcare. And so more than half of my paycheck was going to my 3 children going to childcare there. And so, and I had a discount. And so it really does, but for me, I didn't have anything like Nevada Ready Pre-K. I didn't have, I didn't know about Urban League. There was nothing like that. I knew that. And then when I did find out, they actually said I made too much. Are you kidding me? And so these are the things that a lot of our teachers in our facilities and our centers actually go through. And I wanted to use, with her permission today, one of my amazing coworkers and team members, Margaret, she is exactly what you were mentioning. She started off in the Nevada Ready Pre-K program at one of our centers as a teacher, moved up to an assistant director, and now she's here working with us at United Way of Southern Nevada as a program specialist. And so the system really does work when you put your dollars and put the ideas in the right place. And so to answer your question, when we've helped over 6,000 families, since 2015. And we just continue to pour more and more into the centers. And, when we look at centers and where we want to place our, Nevada Ready Pre-K program, any center can reach out and say, hey, I would be really interested, I've got some children here, I've got families here. We would love to have, be a part of your program. My senior director, Julie Houchins, who I'm here on her behalf today, she really does take the time to really precisely pick where, we're having these centers, because like you mentioned, the east side. We know that is a child care desert, and there are not enough centers in that area. There are not enough centers in North Las Vegas. And, when we choose these centers, we always say accessible child care. We always say developmentally appropriate. We might, but we need to make sure that we're using the word equitable as well, because what I'm finding when we go into these centers is, we have, ladies, about 24 plus centers. And, we have some centers in some areas, and they're all Nevada Ready Pre-K, but it's the area. So we have some centers in really nice areas, and maybe not even super nice, but you walk in, it's like, oh, they've got things hanging from the ceiling, they've got every book in the library.
Daycare he was talking about, right?
Yeah. But then I go into my centers on the east side. They still have their boxes in cardboard boxes. Yeah. I mean, their books in cardboard boxes. They don't even have enough seating for all the children. And so it's not equitable. And when you have families that really need to provide and put their children in a child care facility, it's not fair that their child can only, because maybe grandma lives over here and my job might be closer to here, so if anything happens, I need to put my child here. It's not fair that this parent who puts their child at a school on Nelson Bonanza doesn't have the same opportunities and the same equitable things in the classroom that maybe the school has on Robindale and Eastern. And so it really, for me, going to these centers and really seeing, what the children are getting, I'm like, we have to do better. We really have to. So, Julie is amazing. She has contracts with Lakeshore, and they provide like supplies and stuff for school. She has with playthings and all these different things. So we want to make sure you have a sand pit in your playground. And this school has not swings, but they have slides, and they've got a jungle gym. They've got areas to make picnics, and they have water to pour, and water comes out and makes a huge bubbling brook. And this center has a sandbox. And so we really need to make sure that the centers are having the same things in them so the children can experience everything no matter where they go. And in addition to that, it's childcare. And, you know, a lot of times, you know, we'll have our teachers who we coach, they'll say things like, well, you know, I was in a conversation with, you know, one of the teachers, and I taught kinder for a while too, and they'll say, you know, oh, I teach daycare, I teach 3-year-olds. Oh, you're a daycare teacher. Well, wow, you know, because these teachers care and are passionate, just as passionate about what they do as a teacher in a K through 12 classroom. And so because we know that this is an issue, not only do we provide financial assistance to the families for them to be able to afford childcare, we also provide education to the teachers that are in the classroom, something through the TEACH program. And that allows them to be able to go to school for free to be able to earn their degree in order to get, in order to, you know, make more money. Because what, $10.50, you know, and they're not making that anymore. It might be 13 now, 14, you know, but it's 2024. We know we've seen the inflation. We know what's going on. And we have to do better for our teachers. And to be able to see the growth just from one of my coworkers, I know that we can do it. I know it can happen. In addition to that, you know, we go out and we coach every week. We each have our own set of schools that we go out and we coach. We work with UNR Extension. They provide trainings monthly to the teachers and the directors. Matter of fact, one of our schools is here today, Nevada School of the Blind. And so we really do provide that assistance and that training and the teaching so the teachers aren't lost. You know, if we want them to be better, if we want them to provide this education to students, if we want them to be able to teach them how they should learn so they'll be kindergarten ready, we have to give the teachers the tools as well. And we have to be able to give them the opportunity to learn and maybe get a degree or a CDA so that they can move up and be able to be in positions like this, you know. And so, second part, what was the second part of the question?
I think
This is a hot topic.
No, actually, you covered it, actually. You did.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Okay, and so, again, just talking about like our Title I schools and our schools in those areas where we know we really need that financial assistance. I remember during COVID, someone had mentioned, we keep bringing that up too, I was a reading specialist at the time, and I remember I was online, and a lot of my schools were all Title I schools, and I remember sitting online, and I remember just, the teachers would say things like, all right, guys, I want you to read 2 books this week, or have a parent or a grandma or a big brother read books, and we work at Title I schools. Parents and families don't have libraries in their houses. They don't even always have food to eat, and now we're telling them to grab a book from their house and read. And and so we really have to just really think about the things that we're asking these families to do and the things that we are asking the schools to do, because there's just no funding. There's no money for the schools, and the families don't have the money either. And so, again, just making sure we're
Well, I
thinking
can
that.
tell you how I would answer that question, because whether or not you have a book at home, Madeline, we read the back of food boxes.
That's right.
We read the bread,
Yes.
what's in it, all of those things.
Absolutely.
So there's other ways. I mean, we
Yeah.
can't always come down to funding, right?
Right.
So, but it has to come down to infrastructure, because we'll be talking about funding 50 years from now, right? So at the end of the day, it's an investment in the infrastructure to have the buildings, but for kids, I mean, how many signs did we read on the way in here, Madeline, right? So we were reading them all, because that is the same as, it's not the same as turning a page, but
No.
it's still
Yes.
it's still that piece.
Right, and
So
offering, and that makes
we
me-
got to be creative
right.
too.
And that made me think about our family engagement, because parents don't know. You know, one thing I learned during COVID is that you say, okay, do this, this, and this, and parents are like, I don't even know what you're talking about, Miss Townsend. How am I supposed to do that? And and so being able to have our family engagement events, it's great, because we can now teach the families, here's how you would teach your child their colors. Here's how you would teach your child what the shapes are, because we give them these assignments. Like, I think that's great. I did the same thing with my children. We would turn caption on the TV just so when my kids were learning to read. And, but parents just don't think about it, so, but anyway, thank you.
No, I think that's those are excellent points. And I think to Commissioner Kirkpatrick, there are definitely ways of being creative.
Yes.
And the closed caption idea is actually a very good one too. Director Burns, going to talk about the collaboration and interconnection and so forth. obviously GOED is getting more involved in these conversations because the economy is changing, employer
Correct.
needs are changing, employee needs are changing. How does GOED fit into those conversations to help facilitate policy conversations ahead of next session? What's that role of GOED, if any, if you think?
Yeah, I think you're going to see a lot of conversation as it relates to this issue, and as we have, I would put a little pushback on that it's only the responsibility of companies coming into the state to fund childcare, right? Because if we stop bringing those companies in today, which I don't plan on doing because I need something to do during the day, but I don't plan on doing that. But if we stop that today, we still have a childcare crisis, right? So this is a community issue. This is something that we need to address as Nevadans and people that live here. We will be working collaboratively with GOEN and Katie's group. I saw that our acronym was up there, and it said we had a meeting with GOED, and I was happy because I knew about it. So that's good. But we will continue to work collaboratively in that space and be proponents of that because we all live here. Because beyond the need to have an attractive place for business to come, and that's paramount in what GOED does, we also are all citizens of the state, and we too participate in the outcomes and need to be a part of that conversation.
And I think Director Burns, you bring up an excellent point. We have some members in the room who, of course, have their own child care initiatives. They put investments in their existing dollars into helping address those concerns. You're absolutely right. It's not the issue of new business or old businesses, but it's a statewide discussion because it's not just a Clark County issue. And Director Burns, I think you would say it's a Washoe County issue. Northern Nevada, rural Nevada, all are experiencing the same concerns.
And I think you're seeing, if we're able to put together a thought process and a lane for businesses to play in, I think you're going to see folks start to go along. Tesla just recently invested in a child care facility for their employees, and anecdotally you can hear about that throughout the state, but it does, those little drops in the bucket don't fix the whole problem, and they don't fix it for everybody.
No,
and it doesn't address equality, to your point. Yeah.
Absolutely. I want to be respectful of time. We have about 10 minutes left, so let's open up, if the panel's in mind, let's open up to audience, see if you have any questions before we wrap up our final question for the panel today. Does the audience have any questions? We have a microphone up front if you have any questions.
Here's what I'm going to tell you. That's bad because we didn't do our job if you don't have questions because you should be walking out with ideas. So somebody, come on. Microphone's right here.
Ken, please go ahead.
Sorry, Paul.
No, listen to her, not me.
No, you did a wonderful job. I want to plant a seed with my question. Is there an appreciation, by the way, Ken Evans, I'm the Vice Chair for the Governor's Workforce Development Board. Glad to see everyone here. Is there an appreciation that as we move forward, we're going to have to look at the child care business model and perhaps appreciate the fact that we're going to need to provide a subsidy to get the child care facility built, to staff the facility, as well as possibly a subsidy at the same time for the family or the clients, if you will. I'm planting a seed, but I'm also trying to ask the question because some might think, well, if we just subsidize getting it built, cool, or if we just subsidize the client, cool. But I guess what I'm trying to ask is there an appreciation for the fact that we may have to do all of the above at the same time to be successful?
Well, I'm going to jump in there real quick because Senator Rosen had a bill that highlighted the nonprofits and who operate in that child care space and allowed them to qualify for small business loans. And so I think that's a really important thing to build the footprint with. I also think that partnering, we've talked a lot about businesses opening their daycares. So we need to partner. It may be that you open a daycare and for your business model, whatever it is, and then maybe somebody in the neighborhood can take advantage of that. I think that we need to quit being so self-siloed, and we need to open up and partner across our areas. If Tesla has a daycare and somebody can take advantage of that, that's close, that works at a fast food place or whatever it is, they're still servicing those people that work at that business.
I think that's a great perspective. I think you're right. You know, as all of us talked in this room for many years about breaking down silos, I think that's another perspective to talk about in terms of collaboration and sharing resources. That's a great point, Senator. Do we have any other questions from the audience? Please, go ahead.
Put this down. Good morning. Hey. I'm Tara Raines from the Children's Advocacy Alliance, and among our policy priorities are really moving the needle in childcare. Some of the things we've considered is looking at business waivers for childcare businesses, folks starting a childcare business, and also we've looked at looking at the HOA requirements to promote in-home childcare, like you said, Commissioner Kirkpatrick, especially for those littles. Are there any of those initiatives that are on your radar or that you're moving toward as well? Or have you given any thought to that?
One of the issues that has to be addressed legislatively is apartment complexes as well as other HOA communities, they don't allow childcare within the facility. So I do think in these daycare deserts, in particular, like the east side, which is why we've gone into the apartments, and they've at least given us the community centers so that we could bring people in. But I do think that it's a legislative issue, at least for in-home daycare. Is it 3 to 4 that you could have? I think apartment complexes need to be brought to the table to ask what can they do to help, because what I will tell you with apartment complexes, they say, oh my goodness, we need something for these kids to do because they're tearing stuff up, they're running amok in the summertime, right? For sure. And so our apartment complexes have all stepped up and given the community center, so we bring people in. So I do think that that's a conversation that maybe we could work with the state legislature and the county to bring some of these apartment complexes together to see if there are some options, because we do have that in-home childcare. The state set up their center where you can go and learn about all those things, but I think those are worthy of conversation.
And with that being said, satellite centers. So if there's a daycare in the area that the commissioner is talking about, or that United Way operates, maybe you have a satellite area. Maybe you have 4 kids that are somewhere else, but they partner with that main building. I just think that we need to start being creative and in how we do this. We've got to think outside the box, because maybe a mother in that apartment complex can't get her kids somewhere, but she still needs daycare. Right. And so if that main daycare partnered with somebody within that apartment complex, those kids could be helped. And even in the good thing that came out of COVID is all the online, right? Yes. Those kids could be online with supervision. Those kids could be watching whatever little program that those other kids are in that main building with supervision. So those are the kinds of things that I think we need to start thinking about.
And I'd like to add to that if I could. We definitely need, I love that idea, and believe it or not, we found one. Busy Bee Daycare. They are in an apartment complex, one of our very first. They're off of Simmons, and so what the apartments have allowed them to do is take the clubhouse that they no longer use, and so now she's put a child care center in that apartment complex, and she has mentioned, as a matter of fact, her assistant director, she's a great young lady, she has children and I believe lives in that apartment complex, and so now she's able to come to work right where she lives, and her children are able to get a quality child care program. So definitely I see it working. And in regards to online, I agree, definitely, being able to learn online is ideal, especially coming out of COVID. We know that can happen. But one thing I did learn from working at some of the Title I schools is that I remember doing some of the reading programs, doing some of the little things we would do online, in the afternoons. I've had some parents parked at like a Taco Bell parking lot. I had some parents sitting in a Starbucks parking lot because they couldn't afford internet. Now I know Cox does offer internet for some families that are, whatever the case is. I haven't really looked into it, but sometimes the internet's not always an option either, because families, I guess, they can't afford it, and I guess they don't know about the program. So really getting out there to those families, and making sure that they know that there are other options, there are things that will help them so they can have internet in the home. And then someone else had asked a question about the building, and we do have a few of our child care centers that received a CDBG grant. One of our centers was awarded $2.3 million. She was able to find a center, or something that used to be an old center about 20 plus years ago off of Owens, and she has remodeled. It looks amazing. She's revamped, and with that money, she was able to remodel the facility, hire the staff, get the staff trained, and then of course Nevada Ready Pre-K came and helped and kicked in to help with the, paying for salaries and everything else that we pay for. So, we're getting there, it's just a matter of getting it spread across all of the valley.
Tara, to your point, though, I think if you gave us a list of whatever the priorities are.
I would love to give you a list.
Then,
She came prepared. I like it.
I know Tara, she gave me a list. 5 a.m., she's a 5 a.m. If you gave us a list, maybe we could put our heads together and figure out things that we could look at, but I just think it's a community time to have a discussion, but there has to be some action, right? So even if it's one thing this time, one thing 6 months from now, because we can't keep kicking the can down the road.
Right. And I think,
so much.
thank you. And I think we have one more person that has a quick question. Oh, go ahead. Then we have to wrap it up.
I'll be really quick.
Come on, we're just getting going.
My name is Patty West from the Children's Cabinet. I'd like to say thank you for the shout out working with GOED and the Nevada Workforce Development Child Care Board. I just want to say we do have free consultation for businesses that would like to help be more family friendly. But my question is, as we're doing the free consultation for businesses, I do work with businesses that do want to help and expand. But the thing is the funding, right? Everybody says funding, but businesses also have their businesses to, to fund and work. And so what do you guys think about something to help businesses to be able to help expand so we can get more numbers in those child care centers? Because they do say, yeah, I will pay for spots, but then they, call a child care center like, I don't have extra spots, right? We don't have extra spots because, we're growing. And so what would you think about that, about the helping with expansion or thought on getting more spots in the child care centers?
Well, I think I'm going to answer this question. I think this goes to the U.S. Chamber. This is where Congress can actually help us. During COVID, they sent $221 million to Nevada, which we spent very quickly, right? But the problem is, it's not so much the subsidy because there's always a federal earmark for it. It's the infrastructure. So if Congress could do a one-shot for rural communities, for all these different things, they don't even have any grants for the infrastructure, right? There's grants for operating, there's grants for desks, there's grants for pencils, but there's no cost there's nothing for infrastructure. So if Congress could do a set aside and all the chambers, I sit on National NACO, I'll gen up 3,261 counties. I'm on the board of directors. I'll gen them all up, and we could put some pressure, but then on the state level, maybe it's just a fund that we put together where people can put into the fund, like we did for the homeless thing last session. Maybe it's a fund where we say to everybody, hey, give me $1 per employee, and then we could take that fund, right, that community-based fund, and then we could apply to grants for the infrastructure. So I don't think that you're off base, but I think it's a two-prong approach, but let's see what the community thinks. I mean,
Almost
if
like
it's
the
a dollar.
model, like they were discussing.
I mean, they do
TriShare,
GoFundMe's all the time. I've seen people raise $1 million on GoFundMe in 6 hours. So we need to do a GoFundMe for childcare infrastructure, you know what I mean? And see if there's an account that we could have at the state level, and we could get people to voluntarily put into that. We're a great community. I bet people would do it all day long if they could do infrastructure. And what could we build with $2 million? And if we raise 20, then we could build 10 daycares across the valley, right?
Well, and I think that, just to add real quickly, Paul, I think that the unfortunate part is it's like a push me, pull you, right? So if the businesses, it doesn't matter whether we're talking about a major corporation like a resort or we're talking about a mom and pop business, if they don't have the people that can come to work because they have kids, then they can't get the job done and achieve their goal, whatever it may be. Whether it's making this much money or serving that many people, it doesn't matter what the goal is. So but every business has, you know, benchmarks and goals, and this is what we have to do or we're going to close. So if everybody doesn't recognize that, then it filters down to the child care. It just is what it is, because the working force is not 80 years old. The working force is 28, 38 years, 48 years old, whatever it is. And we've got kids when we're that age.
Right.
So, and it takes a village.
Absolutely. And I wanted to thank you for your questions. So we are out of time, but I just wanted, as we close out, if we could just get from each of you 30 seconds for either a takeaway or call to action for the room today. And Shanell, we'll start with you.
30 seconds. I would really just like to thank you all for having me, but in addition to that, just really, you know, when you are, you know, out and about, you know, and you're seeing people working at the grocery stores and things like that, are real essential workers, just, you know, taking the time to really be patient with them, and, you know, and just realizing, you know, someone might be having a day and not realizing they may have had like an issue with childcare or daycare. I see and hear these things a lot, which is why I'm just saying that. And so just making sure, and also remembering that we need accessible childcare, we need quality childcare, but we also need equitable childcare as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner?
I've said enough, but thank you for coming, and I hope that you all will take to heart that it's time, right, for us to do something.
Right. Senator?
Marilyn, part 2. I would say that I hope that we can partner, because I think this is a really important issue, and it doesn't really matter who gets the credit. What matters is if we get the work done. So please partner, and please keep the conversation going.
Awesome. Thank you, Senator. And Director Burns?
You bet. So, first of all, congratulations for being here, for being leaders in this space. The fact that you showed up on a Tuesday morning at 8 o'clock in the morning when you could be doing other things says that
bacon.
What's that?
There was bacon.
Good bacon too. But when you could have been doing other things, and the fact that you're here shows that you care about this issue. You're in Nevada. You can move the needle. You can move the needle. This lady takes your phone calls. So does the commissioner, right? People that make decisions take your phone call and want to hear from you. If you want to make a difference, you want to make a real difference, call your assembly person, call your state senator, call your county commissioner, and tell them you care about this. That will move the needle.
Awesome.
And I think that's a great way of closing out. I think Director Burns absolutely has highlighted that closing point, is that we're very lucky here in Nevada. Many of you know that we have legislators in the room today. We have county commissioner on stage, a state senator. The fact that you're able to reach out and call them and ask them to be on these panels, to engage on these policy conversations, does show there's a willingness to collaborate and to work together. And Senator, I look forward to working with you on your bill on behalf of the Chamber next session. That's a commitment from this organization to work with you on it. But as we close out, let's give a round of applause for our panelists today. Thank you so much for joining us. I'd like to thank Marilyn for letting her grandmother be here this morning with us. Thank you, Maddie. But most importantly, I'd like to thank the U.S. Chamber Foundation for their support for making this event possible. Thank you, Aaron, and the staff at the U.S. Chamber Foundation. Our Executive Director, Kara Clark, for her leadership, of course, for making this all come together. And, of course, let's give a round of applause for the Orleans staff for doing a great job this morning. Thank you to the staff. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day, and we'll see you soon. Take care.